everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. I am Robert Winfrey, I am your host, and this is your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I inverted that. I normally do that the other way around. I just about introduced myself twice, because habits. Alright, what do we got tonight? Well, we will be reviewing Noche UFC 3, which was a card. There was some good to it, I shouldn't be completely dismissive. I will probably spend a bit more time talking a little bit of boxing because we had on Netflix Bud Crawford and Canelo Alvarez. And frankly, I'm significantly more interested in the outcome of that fight than anything on the UFC card. But, I'm me. So there's that. And uh, I may as well. Let me get this. Let me do this now. Sort of. I'm going to close the podcast. The very last thing will be plugs as usual, but the last segment apart from that I want to touch on is related to the political assassination of Charlie Kirk, a conservative commentator, mostly based here in the United States, though he did do some world touring as well. And here's the thing. One, everything I do is time-stamped, so if you completely want to skip that, you're welcome to. I have no control over what you do. Please hear out my pitch. This is the only thing I'm going to ask you about this, and if you're not interested, I understand. I'm glad that you're listening at all. What I want to talk about is going to be as apolitical as possible. I am not going to get on here and discuss political ideology or political philosophy or any of that stuff, but there's stuff about this that I kind of need to talk about. And as I said, it's not going to be political in the sense that I'm going to get way too weird if I try to justify that statement beyond that. I have sort of gone over what I want to say. I've written some of it out, more or less. I've outlined. I'm taking what I'm about to do at the end of this very seriously because it's not something I want to get really wrong. So it is, as I said, as apolitical as I can kind of make it. I'm sure there's a degree to which politics ingests itself into this kind of discussion, but my purpose in talking about it and what I want to talk about is not political. So that's my pitch for listening to that when I get to the end. It is up to you whether or not you choose to go along with that or you choose to skip it. You've maybe heard or seen enough. Maybe you came here hoping that this would be nothing but a pure escape from the cares and tribulations of the world. And that's why everything's time-stamped. So if that's what you want, if you don't want to listen to some of what I want to say, I have no problem with you. I have no issue with you. This is something I throw out there. You all interact with it however you choose to interact with it. I'm doing it at the end because it felt more appropriate. The only way I can kind of say that. It just felt like I should close with it instead of open. About a year ago, give or take, when somebody took a shot at Trump, I opened briefly with some of my loose thoughts and reaction to that, but I didn't have a lot that I wanted to say, really, for a variety of reasons. I do have things I want to say about this, and I hope you will listen. And if you choose not to, again, listen to the MMA and boxing content and then skip over it. And not that you need my permission or anything, but I have no ill will towards anyone who does that. If you choose to just skip this episode entirely, because there's a listing on the rundown of me talking about Charlie Kirk stuff, I think that's all it's listed as. I might have to change. If I come up with a better title for that segment, I will list it as such. I hope to see you in the next one, and my goal here, again, with what I want to say, is not to advocate for a political party or a political movement. So, if you would please, when we get there, just hear me out. That's really all I ask. And when it's all said and done, you are welcome to call me a crackpot. You are welcome to dismiss it out of hand if you so choose. You are welcome to consider it, whatever you want to do with it. And my sincere hope is that when next week rolls around, you'll still be here. So that's really my big ask, and that's really what I ask, that's my big hope. It's not my ask. You're free to do as you wish, even if I do ask you. So there's my crappy sales pitch. There's a reason I don't do sales work. I am very, very bad at it. So that's what's on the agenda, and we will get to what we get to. Again, there's not been a lot of news because Dana White was busy promoting the Canelo Crawford card, and boy, do I have thoughts about that one. So a few other things, actually. Ugh, I might, because it's the same company, I kind of do, don't I, have to talk about WWE. You know what? As it relates to that Netflix card and whatnot, yeah, I actually do. Yeah, wasn't terribly thrilled about that one, but, well, we'll do what we can here. That's kind of the goal. All right, this intro's dragged on a little bit too long, but I had a sales pitch there. So anything you can do, of course, to interact with the product is always appreciated. Whatever's applicable to your podcast platform of choice, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, sharing around, etc., etc., etc. You all know how that goes. So, yeah, with that out of the way, let's jump into this, shall we? So, Noche UFC 3 from San Antonio, Texas. Came our way early on Saturday and was a card. It's definitely a card. Predictions. Ugh. I swapped a couple of these. I went 7-6. There was a no contest thrown in there too because Zach Reese and Cedricus Dumas. So let me talk about what I switched. I think I wound up going with Jesus Aguilar. I think that was a switch. Yeah, that one was because he fought Garule. The other one I switched, and I didn't asterisk this one, so you're gonna kind of have to just go with me. I switched from. I wound up picking Santiago Luna over Kwong Lee, which had me sweating early going in that one, actually. Boy, that boy's defense needs work. But I looked at them a little bit when they were next to each other, and I also kind of realized what was going on there. The UFC is still kind of looking for the next big, like, Mexican star, and they think they've got something in Santiago Luna. So they gave him a very, very winnable fight. And he did almost lose it, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So that's kind of what I swapped on. I feel good about the Aguilar swap. The Luna one was just like, yeah, I don't feel great about that one. But that one, the Aguilar switch, I felt pretty good about. Any others I got right that I feel good about? Oh, I swapped Hernandez too, didn't I? Yeah, I remember why too. Some of the age of Diego Ferreira's catching up with him, and that was kind of the big thing. Like, he's still clearly got abilities, but there's a real physical slowing that's going on there, and that was kind of what yeah, again, that was so, yeah. Ugh. Again, I barely scraped even. Got the main event wrong. I stuck with Silva whole way through. Got the co-main event wrong. Didn't see that one coming at all. Maybe should have. So yeah, stuck with Gastelum. Dude, if he'd missed by less weight, I might have swapped because that would indicate he tried, and that might have had a deleterious effect on his performance. The fact that he just didn't care. Um, yeah, so I stuck with him. Man, if I'd remembered. So I got this wrong because I looked up Alice Pereira and I kind of half thought it was Alex Pereira's sister. Didn't get a good picture of her. And I saw a picture of her and went, "Wait, that's not her. I should have recognized it earlier." So that's a me failure of like when I was doing this. But that was not Pereira does have a sister who fights. She was in Karate Combat not too long ago. So, uh, but this was not her. Um, very clearly. More on that when we get to it. Yeah, I had a rough prediction set here. I just did. Does happen. Barely scraped, dude. I again barely scraped by positive. So year to date now 279, 94, and 2 with 2 no contests. Hopefully I'm better next time around. I don't know what else to tell you. I did not do well here. All right, as for the fights themselves, main event, wild fight for a little under 2 rounds. Diego Lopez defeats Jaron Silva via TKO. The old spinning back elbow followed up with punches. Um, Man, what a wild fight. Silva does pretty good early, sort of keeping distance, landing some pretty good punches because Diego Lopez's defense. We're gonna have to have a conversation about that. But he throws a spinning back kick, which is very foolish. Lopez fades it, gets his back, rides him down, and gets on top. And for most of the rest of the round, he is on top, moving between full mount and back mount, and he is dropping elbows. He cuts the top of John Silva's head. Eventually, Silva gets free and does enough in the closing seconds, to my mind, to avoid the 10-8. It was close. If Silva had just kind of like escaped and then sort of survived the last little bit there, I would have gone 10-8. But to my mind, he did enough after getting out of the really bad position for a long time to avoid that. But if you did go 10-8, I think it is understandable. None of the judges did, but just throwing it out there, if you thought that was a 10-8 round, I do think there's a case to be made. It's a marginal call, and it's one that I would not die on the hill that was a 10-8 round when you look at some of the stuff Silva did. Not a hill I would die on, but a defensible position. Second round goes pretty darn well for Silva. He's avoiding most of the takedowns. He's landing good punches because, again, Lopez's defense and positioning are not good. But he gets a little bit reckless, gets a little bit overeager, and he's kept throwing this. He's not doing the full-on, like, spin all the way through spinning back elbow. He's doing the, like, dip, and then your backhand rotates, again, to your closed side. So if I'm standing orthodox, I lower my level, my left shoulder comes down, and inside downward diagonal, and then the right elbow goes over the back. It's not quite a full-on spinning back elbow the way that you might anticipate, but it's an effective technique when used properly. He showed that a few too many times, and he forgot one of the golden rules of MMA. I don't know why this is an MMA fighter behavior, but it is. But if you show some weird technique, the other guy, especially if you like kind of land it, or the other guy is going to try and do what you just did to get it back. Lopez didn't immediately throw the spinning back elbow, but He caught Silva coming in with it, cut his head open, got on top, pounded him out. Silva was pissed after the fight, threw a little bit of a punch to the back of Lopez's head. He apologized afterward. Um, I'm more sympathetic to the guy having a bad reaction after being, hit in the head as much as he was than Paul Daly having a full fight. And then after losing, pretty clearly a decision, trying to sucker punch Josh Koscheck. I still don't love this, by the way. I think disciplinary action is probably not outside the realm of possibility. But given the totality of circumstance, I can understand a little bit more how we got here than some other cases where I simply would advocate for you to have better control of yourself. But a few powerful blows to the head do mess with inhibitions in some respects. So, I don't know. Again, slightly more sympathetic. We'll just have to see what the UFC does in response. Lopez said he'd like to fight again kind of before the year's out. I don't think that's impossible. Said he wants to fight anyone, basically he wants to fight anyone that gets him closer to the title. I think he's correct in the assessment that he's not going to get it next. Lerone Murphy waited until after this fight to do the, good job, but I'm next. I think he was wise to understand that Gian Silva could have leapfrogged him. Now Lerone Murphy is pretty clearly the next guy for Volkanovski. The loss to Silva here removes him from that particular running, and it's all roads are clear for Volk and Murphy. Yeah, I'm not going to try to dog Lopez too much because he won. He's got a good chin, needs to be said, but he kind of lives on it, and that's a bit of a problem, especially long term. His cagecraft, his positioning within the cage is another issue that that whole team really needs to hash out some of that stuff. Your real estate management is a real problem for them. He got to show off his grappling a little bit more here than usual because Diego Lopez does not have great takedowns. He has really good, really strong control on the ground. He has really good grappling. He's really scrambly when you get there. There's a lot good about his grappling game. A lot very good. He just doesn't have he doesn't have the requisite skills to, of his own accord, most of the time, force the fight to go to those terms. It's maybe the biggest weakness in his game. And again, not impossible to overcome, but the fact that he was unable to do anything in the grappling against Volkanovski, even to get it in there as a tactical variable, really held him back in that fight in particular. And yeah, his defense is got problems. He's okay thus far because dude seems to have a very, very good chin. Because, man, Volk hit him real clean a bunch of times. But having defensive problems against someone like Alexander Volkanovski is not the same as having defensive problems against Gian Silva. I was willing to kind of give Lopez's defense a little bit of a pass as far as super criticism because of the guy he was fighting when he fought Volk. Silva's not Volk as a tactician or a striking technician. If he's finding your chin pretty reliably, that's not to say that Gian Silva is bad. Be very clear about that. But having defensive problems against someone who does what Volkanovski does is one thing. Max Holloway had defensive problems against Volkanovski, and Max is, great. Islam Makhachev had a few defensive problems with Volk in the striking. Volk's good enough to make very, 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 very good fighters have problems in some of those areas. So the fact that Lopez was not on the level of those kinds of guys, not surprising. Having some of those same problems here, it's a little more concerning. Um, Again, he wants to fight again. I think you make him and Yair Rodriguez. I think that's been the fight to make for a little bit. Let him go. There's some bad blood there. Let him go at it. That's the one that I think is the correct fight. Jeon Silva lost here. Not a good loss. But even in the loss, there's still some of his game that I think is good. I think you would be foolish to write him off completely as a threat to the title based on this loss. It derails his immediate plans for it, but he's still got several things going for him. One, he's exciting. This was a wild fight. This was your fight of the night. And about as good a 2-round fight, give or take, as you're going to find. Really good stuff. Really, like, wild and dramatic stuff here. Second round in particular was really good stuff. Really exciting stuff. So, he's got that. He demonstrated very good striking here. There's still stuff about his game that needs to be ironed out. When he gets a little overly emotional in there, especially when he gets rolling downhill, he gets a little reckless. That's what caught him here. If he'd stayed composed and not walked into that elbow, I'm not saying he was on the verge of finishing Diego Lopez. That would be an overstatement. He was winning that round. And so there's some just decision-making things in real time that need to be worked on with that guy. If you can, I think he is absolutely still of the overall caliber of fighter to be a threat to the title in a sort of generalized sense. Whether he does or not, that remains to be seen in the aftermath. Who should he fight? That's a tough one. That's a slightly tougher one to figure out. Definitely still needs to be a ranked guy. What am I blanking on? I'm thinking of here. Let me bring up the rankings. So he came into this ranked at 10. He's probably not going to suffer too much. You got some options. Arnold Allen's floating out there. Brian Ortega would be an option. No, Ortega's not an option. Ortega's not. No more featherweight for Brian Ortega. No. Taking him off the table. So you got Sterling. Sterling would be kind of interesting. Okay, if you want to do just kind of another one that's going to be a little bit of a barn burner, Silva and Josh Emmett. Not that I wish the brain damage those two are going to inflict on each other on too many people, but if you're looking for a fight that will be, it's hard to imagine that fight being bad. Silva and Josh Emmett as a thought. So that was your main event. Good way to close the night. Co-main event, bit of an upset here. David Martinez defeats Rob Font via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Martinez has a good first round. Really fast, really accurate kicks. A few minor positioning issues. Someone with a little bit faster feet than Rob Font will give Martinez problems because he got back to the fence a bit too regularly for safety purposes, but he was faster enough of foot than Font to not get punished for it reliably. He also did a lot of southpaw fighting, which sort of neutralized Rob Font's jab, which is one of his better weapons. Second round, Martinez slows. A lot of kicking, a lot of movement in the first. That's an energy-taxing style. So Font kind of does what he does in the second round. Gets going. Third round, Martinez kind of gets back in the driver's seat. Gets his kicks going a little bit more. Wins a few. The third round's going kind of back, and they both kind of get hurt at various points. Like not hurt, but tagged for sure. And then Towards the end, Martinez just does all right, it's the last 20 seconds. I'm going to make you brawl with me. And he does kind of force Font to brawl, and he does drop him. And it's enough to secure the round. So really, again, big upset. Font might finally be starting to slow. I mean, given his age, it's inevitable. But I think the slowdown for Rob Font is, we were all kind of expecting it a few years ago. When reports of his slowdown or demise were exaggerated. I think we might be at the point now where it's starting to really manifest. So really good win for David Martinez. Lightweight, Rafa Garcia defeated Jared Gordon via TKO, elbows mostly, 227, the third. So, good fight. Rafa Garcia is a good fighter. Jared Gordon came into this fight with a big old sleeve on his right knee. We all kind of went, what's up with that? And after the fight, we found out. Bilal Muhammad, who is one of the training partners of Jared Gordon, I think he was there with him, I would assume, given what he said. Bilal Muhammad says, yeah, Jared Gordon got hit by a car and popped his knee. Now, I assume he was not struck by a vehicle traveling any great speed. Probably like a parking lot incident or something similar would be my guess. But he insisted on going out there and fighting. And my man, no. If you get struck by a car, even a slow moving one, there's so much mass at play there. And if it pops your knee, like, no, don't go get brain damage on top of that. The fight itself was quite good. Some good dirty boxing in close, some good calf kicks from Garcia. This will be another fight, I think, from this card that was worth looking up. So give it a look if you are, again, so inclined. Good stuff here. Good little fight. Rafa Garcia has turned into, I don't think he's quite ready for like ranked opposition, but he had a rough start to his UFC career. Lost to Nasrat Haqparast, lost to Chris Grutzmacher. That's a tough loss. Beat Natan Levy, beat Jesse Ronson, lost to Dakar Close, again, tough one. Beat Mahashate, beat Clay Guida, lost to Grant Dawson, tough loss. The Grutzmacher loss is one that has not aged well. Grant Dawson is still, that's a tough fight. Recently, he beat Vince Pichel and now Jared Gordon. It's unclear if he's ready to really take the next step. This was a good win. It gets a minor asterisk because of, what happened to Jared Gordon, but 2 in a row at lightweight, beating older guys like Vince Pichel and Jared Gordon, and I say that with a ton of respect for both of those guys. I think Garcia might be due another, serious, kind of up-and-coming guy. And Gordon, I hope his knee's not too badly damaged. I'll always watch a Jared Gordon fight. At, allegedly, middleweight, Kelvin Gastelum missed weight, weighed 191. You missed weight by 6 pounds, buddy. He beat Dustin Stoltzfus via unanimous decision at 30-27 and 2 29-28. I was 29-28 for Gastelum. 30-27 is dubious. I thought Stoltzfus had the second. But, when you miss weight that badly, the actual fight no longer matters. Dude, he gave up 35% of his purse. You factor in all the other... He might have lost money on this endeavor. After the fight, he said, yeah, I took the fight on 4 weeks' notice and I couldn't make weight. How fat are you? I couldn't make 185 on 4 weeks' notice. My man, I weigh about 220. I could get to 185 in 4 weeks. Now, I don't have his musculature, but I also apparently don't have his eating habits. I don't even know what we're doing with Gastelum at this point. Look, I'm trying not to be I'm trying really hard not to, be super insulting or super dismissive, and I'm clearly not succeeding. But he's had weight issues for a while. Now, bear in mind, when I say weight issues, you might look at his record and go, oh, he's only missed weight 3 times. Twice at welterweight, years ago. Now at middleweight. Is it, 3 times? Yeah, that's not great, but it's 3 times. But prior to this, the last time he missed weight was what? He badly missed in that Tyron Woodley fight. I think that was the last time he actually missed weight. Because he weighed 180 for that welterweight fight with Tyron Woodley. And that was in 2015. So we're 10 years removed from the last time he missed weight. That surely all that goodwill has to mean something. 10 years of good work should not, completely remove all this, right? Until you look at the rest of what's gone on with him. I got to bring up his Tapology because they're the ones that are going to have this. Let me just... All right, there you are. So, let's move down to Gastelum here. So he had several fights fall apart with Nasruddin Imavov and Dricus du Plessis. He got lucky. I think DDP would have done some bad stuff to him. So he had several of those fall out. Some were visa issues on their part. Some were health issues on his. He had that mouth injury when he was supposed to fight Nasruddin Imavov. The second time around, he had a fight with Robert Whittaker fall out due to health reasons. I think that was the staph infection that kind of showed up. He had 2 different fights with Anderson Silva fall apart. At least one of those was on him. His fight with Donald Cerrone. Dude, he was supposed to fight Donald Cerrone at welterweight, failed miserably during fight week. That fell apart, and they said, fine, you're fighting at middleweight, and he beat Tim Kennedy. This guy's pattern of behavior at this point is not just the 3 times he officially missed weight. It's everything else that's gone into it. He's only 33, I get it, but he's been with the UFC since 2013. What do we get out of him at this point? He's got fast hands, okay. And he's got good thudding power, okay. But, what do we actually get out of him? He fills up a card. He's not a draw. He's not an attraction. He's not got the upward momentum to actually make a run at the belt. He's kind of been figured out. Now he's just unreliable. Look, 4 weeks is moderately short notice. I get that. But if you can't make the weight, don't sign the contract. First of all, man, dude, Stoltzfus probably shouldn't have. I mean, he probably had to take it because reasons, but Gastelum lost to Joe Pyfer the fight before this. I mean this in all sincerity. Joe Pyfer's not a bad fighter, but someone at this point that's in Gastelum's position, missing weight by 5 or 6 pounds, depending on how generous you want to be, you're a liability, not an asset. I mean, we're 6 years removed from, his maybe fight of the year with Anderson Silva. I get that. That was great. It's a long time ago now. Lightweight, Alexander Hernandez defeated Diego Ferreira via TKO, 3:46 of the second. Lot of movement from Hernandez. He finally did in the second, kind of pull Ferreira into a right hand. Dropped him, finished him off on the ground. Late stoppage from the ref, by the way. Hernandez finally seems to have found his footing. And you know what? Good for him. He called out Michael Chandler. All things considered, I don't think that's unreasonable. I doubt Chandler accepts, but, take your shot. I don't think it was out of line for him to call for that fight, given Chandler's position and given his. I just think it's unlikely, but that's not an unreasonable call out from Hernandez. And Diego Ferreira, again, much respect to him, but dude's 40. And he's had some rough fights. He's been in the UFC for a while. I mean, he got knocked out by Dustin Poirier in Poirier's lightweight debut. Like, Ferreira is not only 40, he's been fighting since 2011 and with the UFC since 2014. Debuted beating Colton Smith. Remember him? You probably don't. I kind of do. Didn't last very long. Um, he's been a battler. He really has. And I respect him for it. I really do. But I think the last of his magic came when he had that big comeback against Mateusz Rimbeski last year. I think that was kind of the last what he really had to offer. He can still win fights, but I definitely think we're closer to the end with him than anything else. And kicking off the main card, Santiago Luna, defeated Kwong Lee via knockout punches, 2:48 of the first. Decent little 3 minutes of action here. Both guys get hurt. Luna just recovers, gets Lee against the fence, is able to pound him out, get a knockdown, finish him off from down there. Good win for Luna. Young, undefeated. Definitely the guy that one of these again young Mexican fighters that the UFC is going to be trying to like make a thing. So good for him. Definitely a good one. I mean, Kwong Lee's far from a world beater, but a decent introduction for Luna, and hopefully it did teach him a few things that he can shore up because he's young enough and his game is still developing. That learning experiences in fights that you win are like the best for this spot in your career because it gives you stuff to do, to work on, to improve upon, concrete stuff, but you don't have like major career setbacks. So that was your main card. It was okay. Main event definitely worth watching. Garcia and Gordon kind of worth a watch, and Luna and Lee was at least quick. On the prelims, Dushko Todorovic defeated Jose Medina via rear naked choke 4:21 of the first. I don't know what Medina's doing in the UFC. Lightweight, Joaquim Silva, in his once-a-year appearance, got a win over a split decision over Claudio Puelles, 29-28. Good first round for Puelles, but a lot of his game revolves around some of the stuff he does on the ground, and he never got enough control to really work that against Silva. So Silva, I thought, took the second and third. I think the third was the other close round. I forget which one it was, but 29-28 either way is fine. I scored it for Silva, so I think I did at least. I don't remember. Look, Silva shows up once a year, has a decent little fight. That's kind of just what he does at this point. Tatiana Suarez defeated Amanda Lemos at strawweight, unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. This fight sucked. Lemos just couldn't get off the fence most of the time. Suarez's takedowns against the fence are not up to snuff anymore. Couldn't really get her grappling going in like really dynamic ways. Lemos threatens a ninja choke at the end of the first. Doesn't get that close to it. She kind of goes for the wrong finishing technique. But Lemos loses big swatches of the third round, but then to close the third does these like big flurries, hits Suarez repeatedly. Her defense and striking are still not very good. Enough to win that round, but not enough to win the fight. I think if you had pride scoring, you would have given this to Lemos, but scoring the fight as a whole is not what the unified rules call for at the moment. So Suarez gets a win, but I had to explain to one of my brothers, like, go watch Suarez's first couple of fights in the UFC and see what she was doing to people. The injuries and the years have definitely caught up to her, and she is not at all what she used to be. At flyweight, Jesus Aguilar defeated Luis Gurule via unanimous decision, 130-27, 229-28. Decent little fight here. I swapped back when I realized like that Gurule I think only had the one fight in the UFC and had a good first round against Ode Osborne. Wasn't disciplined enough to really make it work. I did think that Gurule took the second here, but wasn't up to the pace that Aguilar had in the first, and then the sort of like second resurgence that the second wind Aguilar had in the third. So overall, pretty good performance from Aguilar. Middleweights, Zachary Reese and Cedricus Dumas went to a no contest. So in the course of the very early going of the first round, 51 seconds into it in point of fact, Zachary, standing southpaw, throws kind of an inside leg kick. Both guys are moving around, and he kicks Cedricus Dumas in the groin. Dumas is down. Bad. This was a pretty nasty groin kick. And Dumas was down, sitting against the fence, and could not regain his feet. He called it after, like, not the full 5-minute downtime of recovery, but at like it was almost 4 minutes. It was 3:40 something, I think, of the foul time. He could not stand. He really couldn't stand. He had to be like stretchered out of the cage. He literally could not get upright. So, I struggle to feel a metric ton of sympathy for Cedricus Dumas, all things considered. But, you know, I do definitely have sympathy for somebody getting kicked that hard in the groin, especially in short order. That really sucks. So, like, whatever his, issues with the law, whatever his legal standing, um, it's really, I can't help but feel a degree of sympathy for somebody getting hit that hard in the groin. Like, I've never been hit that hard in the groin, but guys, come on. You've ever taken one, you have the sympathy pains, at least a little bit. So, yeah, that sucked. Flyweight, Alden Correa, good grief, man. Beat Alessandro Costa via TKO punches, 47 seconds of the third round. Costa injures, I think, both of his feet. The smallest, the pinky toe on his left foot was visibly broken, or at least horribly swelling. At the start of the third, and his right foot was kind of messed up too, apparently. Correa looked real good here. He looked sharp from the get-go. Good movement, fast combinations, well-rounded game. Big, big debut from Correa. Big thumbs up to that guy. Women's bantamweight, Montserrat Rendon defeated Alice Pereira via split decision. There was a 29-28 either way, then a 30-27 for Rendon. This fight sucked. Just sucked out loud. Terrible fight. And kicking off the whole shebang, we had the TUF 33 welterweight tournament final with Daniil Donchenko. I was mispronouncing his name last week. I apologize. TKOing Rodrigo Cezinando with punches and elbows, 47 seconds of the first round. The elbow work from Donchenko here, oh, chef's kiss. His punches aren't enough to deter Cezinando, and if you don't have enough power, or the other guy just has an incredible chin, and he's still crashing into you, especially consistently, start folding those elbows over. You will cut a guy. He cut him up, hurt him, eventually got him down, got him to drop against the fence. Solid win for Donchenko there. And that was it. That was the card. Your bonuses, already mentioned, fight of the night was Lopez and Silva. Performances went to Diego Lopez and Santiago Luna. Understandable. I might have gone Garcia over Luna, but, that's just me. Anyway, full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Go give it a read if you are so inclined. Thank you very much. I always appreciate all the support you guys are able to give what I do in that respect, so thank you very much for that. Okay, let's move on to boxing, because boxing had a pretty big weekend. I can fix that next week. Okay. Sorry. Looking at a thing. So the biggest event, the one I'm going to start with here, we had the super fight, one of the last super fights boxing has at the moment, in some respects. Terrence Bud Crawford, moving up to super middleweight, 168 pounds, to fight the undisputed super middleweight champion in Canelo Alvarez. This was on Netflix. It was promoted by Riyadh Season, TKO, Dana White, Turki Al-Sheikh, however that kind of shook out. Let me do a few things here before I talk about the main event, which is what I want to spend most of the fight. I really want to focus on it, but I want to talk about the whole thing before we talk about so I did not watch all of the undercard. Which seems to have done more or less okay. There was one stoppage that was total crap. I forget which one, but there was one of them, like, terrible stoppage. There were 4 fights on the main card. 3 of them were 10-round fights. 2 of those should not have been 10-round fights. And then the main event was 12 rounds. The pacing of this event was pretty bad. I remember Dana White last year, you can find video of him doing this, the pacing of boxing events is terrible, he said. He wasn't wrong, and I'll fix it. You didn't. Had the chance here. You did not. When this event started, oh my God, we started with like 30 minutes of desk time and all that crap. It was terrible. Then I did not need Muhammad Alakel and Travis Crawford. It certainly didn't need to be 10 rounds. So that was not good. A little bit too much of a delay between fights. They had said, this is public record, you can find them saying this. The original idea was for the main event walkouts to happen at 11, to have the walkouts happening about 11 p.m. Eastern. That was the stated goal. The walkouts for the main event happened at 11 p.m. my time, Mountain Standard Time. We're at daylight. I forget which one we're on, but Mountain Time. You were 2 hours plus behind schedule, my guys. You didn't fix anything. Ugh. Anyway, Christian Mbili and Lester Martinez going to a split draw. This is the other fight from this card worth looking up, I think. This was like fun. 2 strong guys in the pocket, forehead to forehead, going. This was a good fight. I was more leaning towards Martinez personally, but you could score that for either guy reasonably or a draw, and that whole thing. Then our co-main event was Callum Walsh and Fernando Vargas Jr. for 10 rounds of sparring. This fight sucked. This didn't need to be 10 rounds. It did not need to be the co-main event at all. Shame on them. No good. No bueno. No bueno. Then the main event. Okay. Again, before I talk about the main event as a fight, I want to finish talking about some of the card. I've complained about the pacing. The time between the co-main event and the main event was interminable. It featured a musical performance from Tool for no good reason. Nobody wants a concert at a fight or a professional wrestling event for that matter. If you have someone there specifically to play one of the fighters to the ring, and it does not affect the overall flow and the overall timing of how everything's going, that can work. Need to throw that caveat out there because that, I think, can work. Having the drummer and one of the guitarists from Tool just play for a little bit, and then having a live, apparently quite good mariachi band do a giant chunk of a, like, there's a 3-verse song, so 3 verses plus chorus. It's actually the same song that Ilya Taporia walks out to. Bud came out to it here. He only came out, Bud, for the last verse and the last chorus. So we just wasted a bunch of time. Just wasted a bunch of time there. Ugh. Visually, the broadcast looked good. The LED board, the LED like platforms that surround the ring, it's kind of like what the ring apron becomes. They're a little extended. They've got LED lights. Looked real nice. Added some real nice ambiance to it. Definitely a good call. The overall Netflix production looked real good. They got some good wide shots. This was a big stadium. They had a lot of people there. They had what? 40,000? Hang on. Because they listed it. You're just not giving me that information here? Well, that's annoying. Yeah, it was some really big... Was it more than that? Hang on, I can find this out. I mean, the number they give is going to be a little bit like the kayfabe promoter number. $70. Geez, yeah, 70,000. Sorry, I knew it was bigger than that. Didn't sound right. Yeah, they had 70,000 people in there. So it looked good. Crowd was into it. There's a lot about the production that was very good. Our commentary trio of John Anik, Max Kellerman, and Andre Ward was pretty good. John Anik does his homework, works really hard, is the consummate professional. When I say the following, I don't mean it as a giant knock to the guy. He's enough of a professional broadcaster that there was not much rust. That said, I think it was pretty obvious this was his first boxing call in a while. He may have done some before in his past, but there's a degree to which, he did a lot of the same stuff he does in the UFC. And some of that works okay. Some of that's a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Some of it not quite so much. He did, to his credit, there's a thing in MMA, with MMA commentary, where they don't actually have their commentary built into the rhythm of a fight. It's why you get a lot of just bizarre exclamations of sound at big events instead of talking through them while increasing your excitement. Good boxing commentators, that's more what they do. Not something Anik has practiced a whole lot. That's a really specific skill set. I wish MMA did it more. But the MMA production side of things would rather they just do the and make goofy faces at the camera that's watching the commentary team so they can throw that clip out there. I'd prefer something more professional, personally. So that's a minor note. Generally, John Anik, really good. Really good. Any professional sports broadcast is lucky to have him. He's very good. So want to give him the thumbs up. Max Kellerman, when he would actually just talk about the fights, was fine. He was a little rusty. I think that's fair to say, but I'm not going to kill him for his actual commentary as a general rule. What I will kill him for is the flagrant, consistent, verbal fellatio given to the UFC, given to the Saudi Arabian government, all that crap. That was insufferable. Glad your check cleared, buddy. And Andre Ward was Andre Ward. And I don't mean that as a negative. But he was who he was, who he's pretty much been for the last few years of this. He is a valuable addition. When Max Kellerman was not sucking off the Saudis and TKO and whatnot. He was rusty, but I thought overall fine. And John Anik was John Anik, and I mean that as a compliment. So, not I'm not going to sit here and pretend this was the best called boxing event of all time, but I don't think it was awful. So thumbs up. A bunch of the UFC guys and commentary team having to like toe the company line this morning. Poor Laura Sanko had to go out there and say, the broadcast for Canelo Crawford was really good. It was the best aspects of MMA production, UFC production in particular, and what boxing has to offer. The pacing was on point, etc., etc. I'm like, oh, Laura, if they're holding your dog hostage, just blink. I mean, there is stuff to praise about this, to be sure. The number of people who got like the corporate memo of, hey, say something nice about the pacing. They're killing us for being hypocrites. Oof. The pacing here was not good. Full stop. You don't have to lie about it. There was good stuff to say here. Say the good stuff. Don't lie about it. You kill your credibility. So, yeah. I wonder if it was a scheduled tweet even. Oh, it might have been. Anyway. So, all that aside, let me get to the fight. There's a few other business things that I want to talk about, but I can only talk about them in context of after the fight. So let me get to what I want to talk about. In your main event for the undisputed super middleweight title, that's all 4 belts and the Ring magazine belt, which is rapidly losing credibility since all it is a prop for Turkey. Terrence Bud Crawford defeats Saul Canelo Alvarez via unanimous decision over 12 rounds. Official scores of 116-112 and 115-113 twice. 115-113 for Canelo is a touch. I say a touch generous. I forget how I had it specifically, because I was sort of half talking about it and scoring it with my friend Pat Mullen, as it was happening. I scored it for Bud. I think I would have been 116-112, which is 8-4. 115-113 being 7-5. I was one of those two. What a performance by Bud Crawford, man. Dude, he made history here. You may not know this. He became the first guy in the 4-belt era to be undisputed in 3 weight classes. That hasn't been done since the 40s. 1940s, not 2040s, which of course we haven't got to yet. It's been a long time. Like, the last time it happened was like pre-alphabet. So, he did something real big here. As for the fight, what a wonderful performance by Bud Crawford. His offense being kind of high variance. His defense. It's not that he never got hit. Canelo hit him. No, Canelo is good enough that even the very best are going to get hit. You're going to get hit with that guy over a 12-round fight. It's inevitable. But it didn't happen very often. Crawford had some superb movement. His defense was always on point. Again, not impenetrable, on point. A lot of blocking, a lot of catching and returning. Some good movement. Once he kind of got a little bit more dialed in, his offense was good. Rapid fire combinations, changing up tempo and intensity. Canelo has a thing where almost everything he throws is basically as hard as you want to throw it. You don't actually want to, when you're actually fighting, you don't want to throw everything 100%. It's really inadvisable for a lot of reasons. You actually want to fight. I mean, even professionally, you want to fight at about 70. 70% of power is really like optimal power output. And again, you modulate it a little bit, but like if you got someone who's out there going 100% from start to finish, you've got someone who's not going to finish the fight. Lower than 70, you get to like 50 and change. It starts to not have much of an effect on the other guy. So 70 is kind of ideal. It's high intensity, good damage, and manageable over the course of a full fight. Canelo throws almost everything at about that point. That's a strategic choice. I'm not going to say right or wrong. I'm going to say it's a choice. It makes your feints very good because if everything the guy is throwing is really hard, you have to respect that feint. Because if it's not a feint, you're going to pay for it. That's kind of the strategic mindset you have with that output. It has pluses and minuses, as all things do. Bud did a lot of, especially when we would start to throw in combination, couple of lighter and then a few power. Like tap, 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 boom. Or, tap, tap, boom, boom, boom. It's something like that. He fought the entire fight southpaw, did Bud. The later part, once we get towards like the later end of the fight, the start of the ninth, like 9, 10, 11, and 12 are some really good rounds. Bud, start of the ninth for him was phenomenal. He started fighting in the pocket for periods of time. He'd get close, and he would block and then throw combinations. He'd throw a few more punches than Canelo was expecting. So Canelo would have this thing where, and this is true of everything, like you get into a rhythm when you fight. Bud disrupted and changed his own rhythm repeatedly to off balance and catch Canelo. Really good stuff. The 11th round from Bud Crawford is a career round. Like that is a singular round that you point to when your career is done and say that. It was so good from start to finish. He broke Canelo mentally a little bit in that round. There's a couple of sequences he does. He does one that's like this really quick double jab to the chest and then up to the head. And the chest one mostly connects, and then the head one catches Canelo off guard. And Canelo like backs up, shakes his head. That's the round, and that way that round went, that Canelo knew that he was in there with the superior boxer. And he kind of gave up. I'm not going to say he gave up on himself. He's too good a fighter for me to throw that aspersion. But a fighter breaking mentally at the super, super, super elite level looks differently than a fighter breaking mentally at every other level. And so it manifests differently and it has different repercussions. But that round, I think Canelo knew he wasn't going to win. That round was gone, and he probably wasn't going to win the 12th. And I don't think he did win the 12th either. But that round in particular is a masterclass from Bud Crawford. Oh, so good. So, trying to put this into perspective, if you're an MMA guy, Bud Crawford started his career at 135. It's lightweight in boxing. And he just claimed every belt at 168. If you're looking for... Now, Canelo is not the biggest guy at 168. If you look at his frame. He's thick enough to fight there, and he's put on enough muscle that at this point I don't know him going down all that far would be super beneficial. He could make... Because what? Light middleweight is 160? Well, light middleweight and super welterweight are the same thing. Yeah, 154. Okay, so there's a jump from 154 to 168. He could make 154 again, but again, he's put on enough muscle mass that I'm not sure it's super advisable or all that profitable for him at this point. But just think about it for a second. If we're just talking size, pick anyone in the UFC at bantamweight, moving up to welterweight. and winning the belt. It's a little bit like Dominic Cruz going up and beating Tyron Woodley. And I use those two in particular because I think Woodley was a good... I'm not calling Woodley the Canelo of welterweight by any stretch of the imagination. But Woodley was also not a very big welterweight. Very muscular, but not very big. So something like that. If you want to cut... The weight differences become more and more important the higher and higher you go. But if you want another way to think about it, somebody at like welterweight or a really big lightweight going up to light heavyweight. I'm suddenly reminded of Anthony Rumble Johnson, who fought at welterweight. I don't know how he did it, and then like moved up to heavyweight and then back down to 205 eventually. Like Rumble Johnson's, what he did to his body with some of those weight cuts, I don't understand. But it's like that. It's a big deal. That's a lot of weight classes, and Bud looked phenomenal. I half expected either or both of them to retire after this. Bud still might. He didn't quite get as much money as Canelo. I think Bud got like 50. Where is the purse thing here? So Canelo, when it was all said and done, got 150 million. 80 of that was he's got to deal with Riyadh season. So there's that. I think Bud got around 50. Probably a little bit more when it's all said and done. Let me see if that should have been disclosed by now. Let's see if that's become... Oh, no. Crawford's more like 10. I'm sure, again, that's one of those that was his guarantee. He probably got a little bit more over that. But, dude, Crawford, it's been kind of a weird thing his last few fights. Not so much the Mad round, but the Spence one and then this one. He took pay cuts because they were important to his legacy. He wanted to stick it to the boxing establishment. Well, pay cuts is a bit strong, but, dude, when your opponent is making like 10x what you are, oof. So he might take one more. They might try to do a rematch. We'll see about that. Honestly, the outcome of this makes Canelo versus Jake Paul more likely. Now, Jake Paul's going to have his thing with Gervonta Tank Davis, so we'll see. But if Jake Paul, given the size difference between those two, I think that's more of an exhibition. But if Jake Paul doesn't get his butt kicked in that fight, we might get him. We might genuinely get Jake Paul and Canelo Alvarez. That is a wild, wild thing to say out loud. This was a little cathartic for me. I said when I kind of half previewed this last week, I did not do a good preview job. I just kind of mentioned it in passing. That Bud has never been the guy that boxing loved. And Canelo has. For years, Canelo's been the guy that the sport of boxing, that's the fan base, that's the promoters, that's the judges. And when I say that, I don't mean that it's like colluded. I just mean that sort of everything that makes up boxing winds up coalescing behind certain fighters at certain times. And sometimes even like one or two of those components might feel like they're in opposition to it, but boxing as a whole can be said to love different fighters. Let me give you an example. This is one I use all the time. Boxing loved Sugar Ray Leonard. Boxing didn't love Marvin Hagler. And it should have, mind you. Boxing loved Muhammad Ali. Now, bear in mind, there's elements of that were at odds with him for chunks of his career, including the fan base. But overall, boxing loved Muhammad Ali. Boxing did not love Smokin' Joe Frazier. It should have. And Frazier had some, good wins, and he certainly had fans. I don't mean to say he was this, forgotten, reviled figure. But boxing didn't love Triple G either. I, I, it's just one of those things where that's kind of been the case. Boxing has never loved Bud Crawford. Bob Arum was deeply frustrated trying to promote him for a variety of reasons. I'm not even necessarily going to say that Bud is always his own best advocate. He's not a loudmouth, but he's insightful. And Bob Arum's like, he's got no personality. Well, he's not bombastic. He's not a pro wrestler. He's a boxer. And he struggled to get fights. Even when he was with Bob Arum, people used that as an excuse to avoid him. He was the wrong combination of good, really good actually, unmarketable, and it just created this weird thing where he spent a lot of time not fighting the best guys because they couldn't get the promotional deals together. And then he moved up in weight and he beat Errol Spence in one of the most phenomenal performances you'll ever see. Is what he did. Since if you've only seen, if that's the only Errol Spence fight you've ever seen, you don't understand. You come away from that fight with the impression that Errol Spence is not that good. Errol Spence is a really good fighter, but Bud made him look like, oof. Bud beat the brakes off of that guy. And now jumped up all the way to 168 and beats the face of boxing, basically. Canelo's been the face of boxing for a while, and Bud beat him. Now, even the loss to Dimitri Bivol didn't really remove Alvarez as kind of like the face, especially the face of Mexican boxing, which is a giant and important component of boxing worldwide. The Bivol loss was kind of just chalked up to, okay, he tried something really outside of not only his comfort zone, but the realm of possibility. It didn't help his chances that Dimitri Bivol is one of the best light heavyweights, maybe ever. I mean, it's like 175, I think. Yeah, there's also a reason he chose to fight Bivol instead of Artur Beterbiev. I think Beterbiev would have really hurt him. Bivol messed him up a little bit, but Bivol's also not nearly the finisher that Beterbiev is, so that's a whole other thing. And and then Canelo the last few years having like avoided David Benavidez assiduously. It was nice to see things kind of coalesce behind a guy who deserved it, and Bud deserved it. Not just for his career, he deserved to win this fight because of what he did in this fight. The fact that it lines up with, this guy who used to be who was kind of the face of boxing, who the last few years had been kind of managing his decline, which I don't begrudge him for in one sense, but when you're holding all the belts and you're avoiding top challengers because you've got all the belts, like, that doesn't sit well with me. So seeing him lose here, he seemed a little relieved maybe. Like, I'm not saying he liked the loss, but I think the pressure of what people expect of a champion and what should be expected of a champion at this point of his career is not something he was terribly interested in continuing. He's probably going to look for a couple of money fights, and that's the other reason I think the Jake Paul thing it might be real. It really might be. That'll be a big fight. I hate to say it. It will, though. That'll be a big fight, and that is so winnable for Canelo, it's not even funny. I get there's a size difference there, but dude, Canelo will beat the crap out of Jake Paul. That'll be a little bit cathartic for, I think, a lot of people. As for Bud, he doesn't want to move up or down. I don't know that we'll see him again. Like, I don't know what you do from here. He might if there's a big enough paycheck, I think you could get him to do one more. But he didn't look great against Madrimov, and I think part of that was motivation. Some of that also just Madrimov being an awkward fighter to deal with to begin with. But yeah, I was so happy that Bud won because I expected the judges, even after watching the fight, I expected the judges to screw him. Because that's just, Canelo gets every break possible. And he didn't here, and Canelo should have had a few other losses on his record. He should have lost those first 2 Triple G fights. I'll stand by that. I thought he lost the Erislandy Lara fight, just being perfectly honest. But Bud deserved this, and I'm over the moon for that guy. So, yeah, that was a big fight. Watch this one if you haven't. It's not like some barn burner of a boxing fight, but it's a good one. It's a really good one. Deserves to be. So, other thing, like, Bud has now put himself in legitimate all-time discussions. He is the best boxer of this generation. I don't think that's terribly disputable at this point. Remarkable talent, remarkable work ethic. You just can't say enough good things about the guy. Where's I going with that? Okay. He might be. If you either have to have him or Alexander Usyk at number 1 pound for pound right now. And parsing between those two, who's the actual top, is a very, very difficult thing. If you have Usyk over him, I am not going to tell you you're wrong. I disagree, but I can't say you have made some giant factual error. You haven't. You can make that case. I mean, Usyk's an all-time great as well. First undisputed cruiserweight champion of the 4-belt era. And the first one to do that. First undisputed cruiserweight champion since Evander Holyfield. He then becomes the first undisputed champion of the 4-belt era at heavyweight. He beats Anthony Joshua twice. He beats Tyson Fury twice. He beats Daniel Dubois twice. Stops Dubois twice in those fights. Like, Usyk is amazing. Bud Crawford is amazing. Another guy who fought this weekend who's also amazing, Naoya Inoue, got a win over Mahmoud Akhmadaliev. Akhmadaliev did not turn in a spirited performance. He really kind of just hung on down the stretch. But Inoue is also kind of topping out at what he's going to accomplish, and right now he's like 122, 125. Dude, Inoue started fighting like 105, I think, or 115. Like, he fought 110 maybe, real light. He's bulked up, but I think where he is now is like, I don't think he could go up another weight class. He is where he is. He's been champion in 3 weight classes, undisputed in 2. Got another really good win. A lot of people were calling for him to fight Akhmadaliev. And Akhmadaliev had his shot, and he did not do especially. I don't want to say he did super bad, but it became apparent relatively early in the fight that he was just not going to have the success he thought he was, and he kind of just rode out the fight instead of getting stopped. I think he claimed some kind of moral victory by not getting stopped, but the way in which he fought, not super impressive. But in a way also genuinely great. I think the fact that he's 3rd pound for pound is more a testament to how good Bud and Usyk are than any knock on Inoue. He's great. We're lucky to have those 3 guys fighting at the same time. Appreciate that if you're a fight fan. If you're listening to me, you lived through the Bud Crawford era. That's special. That's special. So keep that in mind. Also on the boxing side of things, needs to be said, British boxing legend Ricky Hatton found dead at age 46. Too young. Oh, last other thing on Bud, the age reminded me. Bud's about to turn 38. He just did that to Canelo. Good on him, man. Good on Bud. Yeah, but 46 for Ricky Hatton. Too young. Don't know exactly what caused it. That news only broke earlier today. He was supposed to fight later this year. I think like one of those Saudi cards as a celebrity kind of thing. Um, was a really good fighter. I know that like cocaine and booze wrecked him for a period of time. All indications were that over the last few years he'd cleaned up. I'm glad he did. I'm glad that what turned out to be the last years of his life were done sober and not in a drug and alcohol induced fog. So, my condolences to his family and his friends. 46 is just, it's a bit too young, you know? More than a bit too young these days, actually. Um, yeah, that sucks. That really just sucks. Okay. I am going to. Yeah, that's one off. There we go. I'm going to check the old social medias here, and if nothing newsworthy is broken, I'm going to do my actual plugs at the end, but I don't want to go from what I'm about to talk about into anything other than here's where you're going to find me and closing out the show for this week. So let's have a quick look through the old social media cesspool, shall we? Okay. Nope, I don't see anything really worth addressing on here, so let's get into it, shall we? Once again, I'm going to reiterate. I'm going to do everything I can to make this as politically neutral as possible because what I want to say is not about politics. It's not about a political party. It's not about not not in any sort of appreciable sense. There's a non-trivial chance that you have a political outlook. How extreme it is up to you. And you're going to bring a lot of that to what I'm about to say. I'm going to ask you to please hear me in the spirit of what I'm trying to say. Because what I'm trying to say is not about politics. I'm going to get a few things out of the way up front. So, a podcaster, conservative pundit, again, podcast host. No, I'm not going to call him that. Group organizer, fundraiser, just guy kind of involved in it. Significantly more famous than I am, certainly. Charlie Kirk, one of the founders of Turning Point USA, a conservative organization aimed at outreaching towards high school and college campuses, was shot and killed on Wednesday. Not too far from where I'm sitting. He was on the campus of Utah Valley University. It's in Orem, Utah. Now, I've not said specifically where I live. I've acknowledged before I live in Utah. And I'm still not going to tell you exactly where I live. That seems imprudent. Call me crazy. I'm around the age of 40. It means I came up with the advice that your data, your personal information, should not be shared willy-nilly across the internet. Advice that I think we need to bring back, but that's a whole other topic. But I don't live too far from UVU. Point of fact, for a brief period of time, I attended that institution back before it was UVU, back when it was UVSC, Utah Valley State College. I have people close to me, geographically and moderately in my personal relationships, that have been there. I have a neighbor who used to teach there before his department head became unreasonably insufferable on the ideological level. And you're not going to appreciate the following sentiment when I say it, so you're going to have to take my word for this. When you're so, this is the only political statement I'm going to make on this, by the way. When you're so far ideologically towards the extreme on the left that you drive my neighbor out of your department, boy, have you gone too far. It's a whole other discussion. Again, that's the only thing I'm going to say about that. I'm leaving the rest of it alone. Promise. UVU is, by student count, the largest university in the state of Utah. Some 46,000 students, give or take. Fluctuates a little bit depending on the specific semester, but give or take. Somewhere between like 12 and 15,000 of those are concurrent enrollment. High school students getting college credit for what they're doing. And at a public event, I know exactly where this happened. I walked by there all the time. Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck and killed. His wife and 2 kids were in attendance at this event. There were about 3,000 people there. Live, outdoor event. And he was shot by a guy from about 200 yards away. If that sounds impressive to you, you know nothing about firearms. A 200-yard shot at a stable target, non-moving, because he was just sitting down at one. He's doing one of those prove me wrong. I sit down at this table. There's an open mic. Anyone can come up and we can talk. One of those things. Got kind of famous for them. He's not moving. Like, that's a stable, stationary target. You're in a stable position. It's slightly elevated. He was on top. The shooter was on top of one of the buildings, again, 200 yards away, give or take. That's not an especially impressive shot to be made. I know there are people doing the, boy, this sure was professional. Like, guys, I know plenty of people who do target shooting or hunting at that range. And if you're able to hunt at that range with again, this is a rifle. You should be able to hunt further out with a rifle if we're being honest, but not a professional, just someone who's done some shooting. Not the point. Not the point at all. I only bring that up because the conspiracy theorists came out in droves after this one. Because of course they did. That's not a right or left thing. Conspiracy theorists exist happily and somewhat crazily on both sides of the aisle. The metaphorical aisle, at least. Mr. Kirk was 31. Sorry, I'm not going to edit out any of my pauses here, so bear with me. Had 2 kids. One of them was 3. The other was younger than that. They caught the shooter a few days later. Shooter's father turned him in. My heart breaks for so many people involved in this, including the shooter's family. You know what? Including kind of the shooter himself. More on that in a minute. It's awful. I don't know why it took as long as it did to catch this guy, but it did. It took what it took. And the strength of character to turn in your son. Because his son confessed to him that he was the one who did it. And his dad assisted in detaining him and called the police. In this case, I assume detaining is less like handcuffs and more like, I'm with you so that I make sure nothing really happens to you when they show up to arrest you. But I, again, man, I applaud the strength of character that takes, and my heart breaks that he ever had to be in that position. Now, I'm not really here to talk about Charlie Kirk's position. Um, as a matter of full disclosure, because again, I'm going to disclose this before I move on to my next point, which is really, I think, the more salient thing I want to talk about. There are things about Charlie Kirk's positions that I agreed with. There's things I didn't. I'm not going to enumerate them here. That's a in the weeds kind of process thing. Suffice to say, I had my disagreements with him. I had my agreements with him. For whatever that's worth. But I'm not here to talk about that. First of all, the fact that we've gotten to this point with political violence in this country is troubling. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, it's troubling. Minimum. That's about the kindest word I can use for it. But here we are. What bothered me, severely bothered me, was the reaction to this. Seeing it was bad enough, because there was video of this all over the internet. I've seen a couple of different clips. One of them from far enough away that the first one I saw was far enough away that you saw the reaction, like the physical reaction. The second, much closer, and I regret watching it. One of the worst things I've seen. Yeah, I know people who were there at this event. At least one of them pretty close to in relatively close physical proximity to Charlie Kirk. So I am. You'll forgive me if I struggle a little bit with some of that. Hopefully. But again, the reaction was what really bothered me. Because I saw people celebrating this. I saw some people I know more or less celebrating this. The sentiment, the most charitable sentiment that I saw some of them express was that, well, the world's a better place. At a minimum, that is a borderline psychotic utilitarian worldview that you do not want turned back on yourself. Believe me on that. And then, of course, there were the other people who are significantly less charitable. Thankfully, to the best of my knowledge, no one I know personally expressed the following sentiments. He had it coming. I wish that the shooter had got Kirk's wife. Then his children could be raised by adopted people who would teach them to hate their birth parents. Then they'd be okay. To anyone expressing that particular sentiment, I don't know that any of you listening are, or if you know anyone that is. That is a quarter step, at best, from saying the kids should have died too. And I don't have it in me to yell and scream about that right now. Suffice to say, that should be a self-evidently terrible, evil position to adopt. And I'm left looking at this, going, a 31-year-old husband and father was publicly assassinated at a college campus speaking event that invited open debate. And this is where we are. And then this is celebrated. Now bear in mind, I'm not even asking people who vehemently disagree with everything Charlie Kirk ever said to express false sympathy. You don't have to. But you couldn't have, for a chunk of them, for a chunk of the population, be very careful with my language here because I'm trying very hard not to undermine the point I'm about to make later. A significant portion of the populace couldn't contain their glee. And that's not the same thing. Said, I don't need you to express false sympathy. I just kind of need you to be human. To behave like a human. And if you're more left inclined and you just heard me say that, bear with me, please. I'm not trying to attack you or isolate you or anything like that. I'm really not. Every point I'm going to make, I am aiming squarely at both sides of the following issues. So, I was then struck in the aftermath of some of this, seeing people I know reacting the way they reacted. I'm stuck wondering how we got here. And I thought about it, because that's what I do. And this is the closest arguably this is the closest I'm going to get to bringing up my religious convictions. Because again, I'll say as in the interest of full disclosure, I am a practicing member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I prayed about it. And I thought and I studied it, and I kind of think I have my answer. And I'm not happy that I have it, because, well, you'll see when I get there. I'm grateful that I didn't say much before now, because we know a chunk more about the shooter at this point. Apparently initially raised a member of in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, left it some time ago, and did one semester, I think, at USU, Utah State University, which is, some people, especially those on the right, you see our educational institutions are hotbeds of leftist thought, and they're indoctrinating our kids. There's schools that I think you could somewhat fairly levy that complaint at. Believe it or not, USU I don't think is one of them. That's really not what that school kind of does. UVU, I think you could levy that claim at, but that wasn't where he went. He only went one semester. He was living with with his boyfriend, a trans female. I'm not gonna try and parse out my language on that, so just go with me, please. And I'm not saying it's impossible for a single semester at a college to have a potentially radicalizing effect on someone. I find it just very unlikely. At the moment, it looks like most of his radicalization occurred online, which is not surprising. And that's why I want to do what I'm about to do. The the information about, again, kind of how this guy went from, he had like a 4.0 GPA in high school, high ACT scores, good scholarship to USU. How you go from that to someone who decides it is appropriate, potentially necessary, to get a rifle, a fairly bog standard 30-06, by the way. The kind of rifle that is entirely permissible under even some of the more stringent gun laws in Europe. Pick your European country, and you will find people that have, like, this gun. And shoot this gentleman in the neck. How did we get here? Well, I don't know enough about the gentleman in question to give any specifics, so instead, I need all of us to set aside our politics for what I'm about to do. Because your politics don't matter for this. They really, really don't. How did we get here? There's a handful of things that created this monstrous machine that we are kind of caught in here. And we have to go back a little bit to understand the steps that got us to this point. I think the first one I'd like to draw attention to is tabloid journalism. Now you might be thinking, really? That's where we're starting? Bear with me. Tabloid journalism exploits I can't even say minor, but it exploits a bit of wording in the law around legal exposure for news outlets. You see, a news outlet is subject to litigation under certain circumstances. If it's spoken, you get sued for slander. If it's print, you get sued for libel. Now, here's the thing. If the best reporting at the time indicates X, and you report X with the best reporting and the best of intentions, then a little bit later it turns out X is not true, Y is true. Under strict liability for libel, slander, etc., you could be sued. Now, that's a bad way to go about this, so there is a legal exception. It goes something to the tune of, I don't have the exact wording, but it basically boils down to, if you have good cause to believe what you are reporting is true when you report it, you're covered. You are exempt from a lot of these, from certain lawsuits. And that seems like a reasonable exception, doesn't it? Does it not seem like a reasonable exception? Does to me. Unfortunately, if you're a bad actor working in bad faith, trying to sensationalize everything, that provides you all this ground in which to play. Depending on how much younger than you are, depending on how much younger you are than I am, order that properly, you may never have seen an actual tabloid. You can still kind of see them in certain, like, Walmarts or whatnot. They are lurid, sensationalistic bordering on fan fiction that avoids being sued into the ground with that legal loophole. A necessary legal loophole, mind you. I think it's a good one. I just hate that it's exploited the way it is. And their whole thing, again, it's sensationalism. This is where you get, like, there was a long-running gag that Elvis is alive. Because a tabloid would throw that up every now and then because someone sincerely believed they saw Elvis. And if you had reason, and if you could believe that they sincerely believed what they were saying, and you didn't really have demonstrable proof otherwise about this being Elvis, you could run that. Or you could couch it in some specific like language that gets you around. Yeah. I'm not going to get off on a tangent. But this started, again, with tabloids. That's what they were called that. They tried to shock, they tried to sensationalize. They were, if you're a younger person, think of this as the original clickbait. Becomes an important point of comparison in a minute or two. The other thing about this is the advent of the 24-hour news cycle and news stations on cable TV. Perhaps started with noble intentions, because it's important to be able to get news all the time instead of simply at the points at which it breaks into major TV stations. Especially for some larger important stuff that is not important enough to cause a breaking news break in programming. Again, perhaps well-intentioned. But there's an old maxim in the news industry. Used to be more true of newspapers and radio back when those were the predominant methods of disseminating news. The maxim goes, if it bleeds, it leads, because that will drive circulation. The sensational, the wild, it drives circulation. Those combined are pretty bad. And for a while, you could sort of avoid being too isolated by somewhat cross-referencing, especially major news outlets. What one like, say, MSNBC, which is significantly left-leaning, or what Fox, slightly more right-leaning, are saying, where do they overlap? That's probably close to the truth. It wasn't impossible to do. It took a little bit of work, but most people kind of just paid attention to one or the other, especially over time, for a variety of reasons. And then the internet came along. And not just the internet in particular, social media. I'm not about here to say that I am anti-social media entirely, but it's an important bit of the architecture of the horrifying machine we find ourselves in. Social media allows people to connect. It is, used properly, I think, a great boon. But like all things, it is not inherently good or inherently evil. It is simply a tool. What you do with it is up to you. This one wound up, it turns out, to have significantly more perils and pitfalls than we originally anticipated. There's a few things going on there. To get to the point here, and let me just very briefly say this. I have a friend. He sent me something the other day, as he does on occasion, and I'm grateful for them. He sent me a video from a guy a little older than I am. That was his response to some of these like AI-generated videos that are just like nostalgia bait for the 80s. And he proceeded to remove the nostalgia glasses and go, here's what the 80s were kind of really like. And he takes a slightly dimmer view of the past, some of which is fair. One of the things he mentioned, though, and it kind of struck me, as I was reminded of it as I was puzzling over how we got to where we got to. He mentioned that your social circle is limited to, especially if you were a kid, a pretty small radius. Best case scenario is probably about 20 miles. That's it. That's your social circle. Those people in that area, and depending on your school, theoretically it might be bigger, but if they're far enough away, maybe the only time you see them is at school. But anyway, that was it. That was your social circle. And you had to deal with that. If a friend of yours moved 2 towns over, or God forbid, out of state, that was it. They may as well have died. Now, the internet and social media remove that. There's positives and negatives to that. Believe it or not, I think one of the negatives is the sort of inherent understanding that your immediate vicinity constituted the most important social circle you could develop. And socializing, especially kids, under those circumstances in a way where they had to, like, interact, talk, find common ground, find differing ground, share things. That was an important skill. The internet doesn't make you do that. The internet lets us all self-select with, the world. That's an important thing. Now, again, this has some benefits. I met my best friend through this process. I met him because he used to host this show. It's Mark. He lives in Florida. That's 2/3 of the country/continent away from where I live. Now, if he asked me to help him bury a body, I'm using this metaphorically, I would. But if something really bad happens, like, I can't get there to help him or him me. It's the people around you that do that. It's the people around you that you connect with, that you build human connections and retain your humanity through. We kind of lost that. Or, lost is a bit of a strong word. It's been severely affected. Let's put it like that. I say, but this is where it starts. Because the people you find on social media, some of them you know. Maybe from real life, maybe only from the internet. But maybe you know them quite well. And then you start to find other people who are friends of your friends. And maybe you have enough in common with them to become friends with them. Maybe you don't. But you start to self-select, and you start to build. You see, there's so much on the internet. It's everything. Sum total of human knowledge at our fingertips. You have to build structure around that. So you do. Find friends. You've self-selected already into things you have in common. Sports, movies, TV, whatever. You've self-selected. And these are people who you have at least one thing in common with, and probably more than just one thing in common with. And you start to share. You start to talk, and the life just kind of comes out of that a little bit. And you have your view of the world, because of course you do. We all do. It's not a bad thing. And at some point, someone you know posts, someone talking about policy or politics or an election. Maybe you're not super plugged into the political sphere, but you certainly have opinions about the last election. This could be any of them, by the way. I don't just mean the most, some of the more fractious ones in the immediate past, but could be any of them. Might have had really strong opinions about the second time Obama was elected. Things of that nature. Somebody has opinions. And you listen to them, and then they start sharing clips. Little, video segments. Maybe written stuff initially from other people who are more on the political side of things, political pieces. And you read. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree. But you read. You listen. You watch. And now, my friend, you are trapped. Maybe not completely, and you don't even realize what's happened. Because you have self-selected people on a broader social network, something like Instagram or Twitter. This is more of an issue, but don't get me wrong, it comes up on others like Facebook as well. You've selected people, maybe some of them news, maybe some of them you follow for work, especially if you do something like what I do. And that gives you recommendeds. Hey, we recommend maybe following this person. Maybe this is a new friend. Maybe this account says things that you would like to hear. And now, when you play with that a little bit, because you go along with that, you like to meet new people. Sure, yeah, you follow a lot of. I'm going to speak to you because we're here. Maybe like you're an MMA fan. Sure, you follow Ariel Helwani because he breaks news. Maybe you'll also follow, this guy because he does MMA news. And maybe this guy because it's sort of general sporting. And this guy does great fight breakdowns and so on and so forth. And you give information, behavioral information, to something you don't even really know is there. Maybe you dimly know. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've been doing this long enough that you remember when it was sort of introduced that this was there and nobody really cared. But now there is a machine learning algorithm that is looking at what you've done and giving you more stuff. So let's take the components that we have right now and look at how they form this horrible machinery of a trap that we have stepped into here. You have created a framework of people and things, interests. You exclude some, you include others. This is necessary because there's too much for you not to, so you kind of have to. But it can be turned against you. And then, mostly because when you self-select like this, especially when you self-select like this, you get a lot of people with not just similar interests, but who almost invariably, through self-selection over a period of time, wind up having the same opinions you do. Some of it through mutual influence, some of it through other means. And this is how you start forming an echo chamber, a silo. And you think it's big, because more people might be coming into it, more accounts might be worth your time. And it's not. It's actually getting smaller. Because more and more is being excluded. Your echo chamber, then, and echo chamber carries a very, very negative connotation. And as I mentioned, some of this is, in fact, necessary. So, your chamber starts to sound more and more like you, or you start to sound more and more like your chamber. In no small part because the machine learning algorithm feeds you what you already like and what it thinks you want. After a little bit, it feeds you what you know you want because it made you want it. And remember all that stuff about tabloids, the stuff about sensationalism? This is where it comes into play because You look at something sensational, an inflammatory soundbite, a provocative statement. And if you look at it too long, you watch all the way through, somewhere in that machine learning algorithm, it logs that this is a thing you are interested in, so you get more of it. Maybe it starts almost imperceptible because something big happens, or something big within your immediate interests happens. So you look. I'm not even saying you shouldn't. You try to learn. You try to take in information. You try to recalibrate your immediate senses, your immediate surroundings, your worldview in light of new information. But this algorithm checks that, notes it, gives you more. And this is fed in a horrifying Ouroboros by all of the people putting the stuff out because they see what generates more interest, more watch-throughs, more click-throughs, more views, more responses, is the more sensational. So they put out more of it. And you see a little bit more of it, and the algorithm recommends more of it to you. Do you see the trap? Do you see what's happening? You have constructed a potentially necessary framework around this space, and now everything that you've let in is narrowing and being refed to you and is getting worse and sensationalized. And this is what you see constantly, all the time. All these systems working to keep you in a state of high alert as often as possible, to sensationalize, to inflame, to excite. And this is unhealthy in so many ways. And this becomes a bit more of who you are, a bit more of your worldview. We spend so much time looking at screens, so much time, that becomes more important than what we're doing in real life in some respects. And the people out there, you don't really know most of them, do you? Maybe you know some. Certainly you know some. At least one of your neighbors, probably. But some of the people you know are then going to wind up expressing opinions contrary to your own. This now is foreign to you because you are used to everything sounding like you, or you sounding like everything, depending on how you want to look at it. And now you've got someone saying something foreign to you, and you have been told repeatedly via news and sensationalized people and sensationalized stories, this is bad. This is real bad. Suddenly you're not safe. Suddenly you're in danger. That guy from 3 houses over expressed a viewpoint that is, if you think about it logically, fairly benign, but different than yours. Different than what you've seen. And you've been told to be on alert for these people. Now, are you going to engage with this person? You might yell. You might say something. You might just not talk to them again, quietly. You might go back to the comfort of the avatars and the text. I go back to the comfort of the structure and framework and the machinery that reinforces all of it. This is how you become isolated. This is how you become atomized from the whole. And this leads you, me, all of us, vulnerable. Most specifically vulnerable to being propagandized. See, it's already happened, believe it or not. Maybe not too severely, but it's happened. You've been told, you've seen, because some of this bleeds over into real world. So some of those other people that you know, people in your life maybe, will wind up reflecting some of this back to you, and they're safe. So you echo at each other. And other people may be different, and you shy away from them. Maybe with good reason, maybe not. You certainly think it's understandable, maybe even rational, that you withdraw from these people. And you feel like you are not alone. There's a few people in your social circle of real people that you can hold on to. You know they're safe, you know they're like you. They think like you, feel like you. And more of them are in the smaller, in some respects, community or people that you meet online. You found them maybe via honest social media, maybe you just have an interest, and you discovered there's a subreddit for that. And they've got a Discord. And it's a safe group of like-minded people to just share all the things that they agree with, all the things that they like. So you stay with them. It's safer. It's easier. It's not like out there. It's like those people. And within all of this, because you do have a worldview, inevitably, invariably, inexorably, slips people whose job it is, who are in the business of politics. Maybe they're good faith operators. One would hope. Maybe they're not. And inevitably, a lot of them that you do follow wind up being less. Why? Because that's what gets attention. That's what generates clicks. And you, the algorithm already knows, prefer the sensational, prefer the inflammatory. Whether you really do or not is somewhat immaterial. That's what it's fed you. So that's what you get more of. And then there's the people. Probably more than one. They sit and they talk. And they talk about the world. And they talk about politics. And they talk about war. Sometimes literal war. Sometimes metaphorical war. And they talk about them, the other side, and all the bad things about them. And they prove it. They support some of their claims with a degree of evidence. They can cite news stories from reputable sources that talk about these bad things. And that's what they talk about. Because they wish to sensationalize, because that feeds what they do. Which then trickles into you. And you, maybe you're even a little leery at first, but it comes up so often, and at least two of those stories that were referenced, you maybe even looked them up on your own, and man, that checks out. Man, that is messed up. Well, you see, now the algorithm knows you looked for them on your own, especially if you clicked on them through a link provided via one of those outlets, like YouTube, or Facebook, or Twitter, or Instagram. You clicked on one of those. Of course it knows you clicked on them. It's the algorithm. So now it knows to give you more of that. So that's what you get. More sensational, more of the worst, more. And frequently, it's about them. Why do I say them? To understand, you may be thinking about all of this, like, yeah, this isn't great. It's really not great thus far. We've created a bit of our own structure, and now our structure full of people, most of whom at least mostly agree with us, because that's how humans relate to each other. We mostly agree about most things. that winds up being narrowed over time through some self-selection via algorithmically fed news or clips or other people to continue to narrow all of this, to further isolate and to further inflame. That's not great, but how is it? That still seems like a leap, doesn't it? To get from that's where we are to celebrating murder. Still seems like a leap, doesn't it? There is, in fact, a mild missing component here. And it's how your brain responds to all this, how it processes all of this. When people talk about propaganda, propaganda hasn't changed. Everything I've described to you is the propagandization process. Got there eventually. It's been the same forever. Since the beginning of human civilization, it always goes the same. The delivery mechanism changes, but the steps and their effect are inevitable unless you choose to stop them. Why is it so dangerous? Because of what our brains do. What do our brains do, you might be asking? You may not know this. Maybe you've heard me do this before, in which case you know what I'm about to say, and I apologize for the repetition. But for those of you here for the first time, our brains, the human brain, marvelous little thing that it is really good at a few things. The two most important things, perhaps, that the human brain does, it is very good at, are pattern recognition and categorization. We recognize patterns. Oh, 3 different people ate that berry and died. That's not something we want to eat. Well, what about that can we learn? Well, it's got certain colors. It comes from this kind of tree. That one, what about this berry? Well, it looks kind of similar. Tree's kind of the same. You know what? Let's not. That's safe. This other berry looks different, comes from this thing. We've seen people eat it and be perfectly healthy. One of these is safe. One of them is unsafe. The grand process by which human beings get around elements of natural selection. Pattern recognition, categorization. The most important category that we develop is a very, very simple one. It is the first one. This is primordial to the human brain. It is unwavering. It is flexible in the sense that when you're aware of it, you can use it, you can play with it, but it is an unwavering part of humanity. We categorize people into 2 great silos, us and them. You can see why this is necessary, if you think about it, believe it or not. When you are an infant, you are helpless. You're still processing the world as much as you can with your developing brain. And you need to know, you need to recognize and understand other people that look like you, which of them are safe and which of them are not. Us, we are safe. These are the people that feed you, that clothe you, that protect you, that care for you, that make it possible for your small, fragile life to continue. They're safe. And if you are not one of us, you're one of them. And they could be dangerous. Back in the distant past, they probably were. They probably wanted to kill you and take your stuff. So you, as an infant, recognize not safe, and you do everything you can. You make noise. It's about all you can do. You're an infant. But this is the great divide. Us, them. There is no ethnic, racial component to us. We, boatloads of studies on this. We can be anyone. That's a beautiful thing, isn't it? I mean that sincerely. That's beautiful. Also means they can be anyone. Ugh. Functional, less beautiful in its implication. And why is this important? Why is this great distinction important? Well, as I said, they are dangerous. Possibly. For a period of time, probably almost universally were when this formed. And if they're dangerous, if they want to kill you and take your stuff, well, the only thing you can do is fight. Violence. Kill them before they kill you. Harsh. Brutal. Tragic, perhaps even. But also damaging. You've heard me say this before on this program. Doing violence traumatizes the brain. Being on the receiving end of violence traumatizes your brain. Viewing violence traumatizes your brain. Brain's very sensitive that way. Doing violence is almost as damaging to your brain as receiving violence. Once again, feel free to look at the studies on this. Feed the algorithm that. Sorry, that's a little bit too conspiratorial a tone. So, if you are the person who has to defend us from them, you might have to do violence. Almost certainly will. That screws up your brain. That messes you up. That makes you less likely to be able to do it again. And that's bad. Because then, if you have to do it again, and you can't, things go badly. Real bad. Probably. So what do? Your brain, marvelous thing that it is, will do everything it can to inure you to the consequences of doing violence, to the consequences of trauma at all. How do you inure yourself to violence? It's a good question, isn't it? Well, the brain came up with an answer. There's a chemical component to this, but functionally, there is a biochemical component to this. Is an important point. I can't remember the name of the chemical that is at play here, forgive me. But functionally, you stop seeing the things in them that make them look human. Because doing violence to something that is not like you is easier. This is why we struggle, believe it or not, with violence towards certain domesticated animals. We project onto them humanity. So when they are injured, hurt, suffer, we react badly. But there's a reason people react differently to the puppy in John Wick dying than the St. Bernard in Cujo getting a stick through the eye. At least that's how it is in the book. It's been a minute since I've seen the movie, and I can't remember if they kept that ending in particular. We react differently to those two things. Because we project differently. We're supposed to project differently. And it's easier to do the violence. There's a reason that dog actually, part of the reason we react to that is the way they made that dog up by the end of it. Looks a lot less like a dog. But you don't react that way if to someone doing that to a wolf. You know the difference. It's weird, but we do. It's easier to do violence to people when you don't see them as people. When you can't see their faces, you stop recognizing within them humanity. Believe it or not, that is what every perpetrator of an atrocity that we've been able to record talking about has said. Whether it's the Germans in World War II, the Stalinists, the KGB in Soviet Russia, the Khmer Rouge in Colombia, the Tonton Macoute in Haiti, doesn't matter. They all, the perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide, go down the list. They all say the same thing. All say the same thing. They weren't people. I stopped seeing faces. I stopped seeing them as like me. And that made it easier. It is a survival mechanism, an intrinsic survival mechanism, weaponized to the worst instincts in humanity. And that is what brings us to where we are. We have self-selected into these moderately atomized groups, most of whom sound like us, algorithmically fed more and more of the insanity, of the sensational, the extreme, all of which is aimed at them. And this is where we get to celebrating murder. That's how we get here. Now you are incapable of recognizing the humanity in other human beings. Now, when something bad happens to one of them, you respond with glee, bemusement. And if you'll have paid attention to everything I've said, I didn't say anything about which side you're on, which political alignment you subscribe to, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. That's the machine, folks. That's the matrix we are caught in. Hopefully you can see it now. Because people I know, good people, reacted in ways to the cold-blooded assassination of a 31-year-old podcaster. In ways that still bother me. And I can hear some of what you might be saying if you think that's aimed squarely at you. One, it's not. If I was profoundly disturbed by anything you said, you are not part of my circle of influence anymore. On the plus side, as a minor note, I did not lose, to the best of my knowledge, any of my friends over this. Which I consider a small victory. And part of the reason I say I know what some of you might be thinking, because I haven't brought up, beyond the immediate reaction to what happened to Charlie Kirk, your alignment, or the alignment of anyone, because it's all the same, as far as the trap is concerned, as far as the horrible machinery chewing up and feasting on the remnants of our humanity and our souls. Doesn't care. At all. See, part of the reason I know what some of you might say is because I've seen this. What happens in most of these cases is, if confronted about this kind of thing, and you know what, for the sake of argument, I'm going to make this point. When confronted about this, the most common thing we retreat into, and yes, I happily include myself in this, I am still occasionally guilty of what I'm about to describe. The most common thing we do is whataboutism. It's always phrased as what about. Might be more phrased as but. So, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk and what happened and the reaction to that. Oh, but you didn't. You didn't react. You didn't care enough about what the Utah senator said about those two state senators who were killed in Minnesota. Oh, yeah? But you didn't say a whole hell of a lot about the next thing. You didn't say enough about that. You didn't say enough about the last school shooting. Oh, you didn't say enough about the shooting before that. Well, you didn't say enough about January 6th. People still banging that drum. Well, you didn't say enough about the $2 billion caused by the BLM riots, because we're still banging that drum too, apparently. From one of those at each side, because frankly, both of those still being brought up bothers me for reasons. Well, you didn't say enough about the pandemic. There's people still saying we need to be talking about the ongoing pandemic. We're 5 years into it, people. It's endemic at this point. There's nothing you can do. For crying out loud. Well, you didn't say enough about what's going on in the Middle East. Well, you sure got off the war in Ukraine real fast, didn't you? Well, you sure moved on from the previous Russian invasion. Didn't say much of anything about that, did you? Well, you didn't say anything about, the violence and political turmoil going on in South Africa. Well, you sure didn't say anything about the famine in... I forget where it was. I'm doing this off the top of my head. People, cut me a little slack. You didn't say enough about that famine. Well, you didn't say anything about the ongoing migration crisis in the UK. Well, you didn't say anything about the concentration camps that the Chinese put the Uyghur Muslims into. And you didn't say anything about the decades the Chinese government was persecuting Christians before that. Well, you didn't say anything about the Chinese government annexing Tibet and suppressing it. Boy, China's catching a lot of strays here, aren't they? Well, you didn't say anything about Russia annexing Crimea or their attempted invasion of Georgia, or you didn't say enough about the plight of the Aborigines, and you didn't say enough about the pygmy African tribes. MMA component to that one, because Justin Wren is still building wells for him. God bless you, sir. And you didn't say anything about, the land that that's stolen that we're operating on. And we can go on and on and on. I did that off the top of my head. Boy, is that depressing. We can take that train back to Cain and Abel. Whether you think that's a literal thing or just a useful bit of mythologizing the introduction of violence into humanity, I'll leave up to you. I don't care that much. But that's how far back we can take this. It is nothing but reductive dismissal and whataboutism to avoid our own cognitive dissonance. It is corrosive, it is destructive, and it is a means of deflection, not understanding. And then there's the other great lie we tell ourselves about our response to this. The line I'm about to use is quoted more often by people more on the political left, but the sentiment is held quite fervently as well by the other side of the aisle. So the quote is not aimed at one side or the other. The sentiment is aimed squarely at both. And it's one of those lines that seems profound if you get your life advice from self-help books, or think Aaron Sorkin's writing is the pinnacle of television. It seems profound and intelligent until you actually think about it critically for more than 12 seconds. I will show empathy only to those who have demonstrated empathy. Congratulations, you don't have empathy. You have moderately regulated psychopathy and boundary issues. You internally hold hostage the humanity of others until they meet and conform to your arbitrary standards. Once again, you do not have empathy. You have regulated psychopathy. Poorly regulated psychopathy most of the time. And anyone who falls within our silos, who falls within our echo chambers, who would fit right in there, to them we give the world. Unfairly, unhealthily, we give them the world. To anyone outside of it, well, I don't care if you get shot in front of your wife and kids, or murdered in your own home. This is how we get to where we are. That's what it looks like going forward if nothing changes. The erosion of our humanity, the corrosion of our souls. Whether you believe that to be literal or metaphorical, I leave up to you. I said before that my heart has been broken by this. And I'm glad. It breaks for the shooter, for the life and the choices that he made to get to the point that he did. God, that's sad. To his family, who lost their son. We'll probably lose him in mortality, because Utah never got rid of the death penalty. In fact, I still think we have firing squads. And I will pray for that man. I still think he probably should be killed. I think that is what justice demands. But I will not celebrate his death. I don't need a public execution. I've seen enough of that. And I saw people, in the aftermath of their gleeful celebrations of the death of Charlie Kirk in front of his wife and children, this woman turning into a widow, a 3-year-old daughter with only vague memories of her father growing up, and another one who will never know their father. Not on this side of the veil. And a lot of them were reported to their places of business, their employers. Many of them lost their jobs over this, and I'm sad for them too. Sad that they've become that corroded. Sad for the hardship they're going to have to endure, even if I think it's fair. For some of them, I do. If I may inject my personal opinion into this now, if you are the kind of person gleefully celebrating, I don't need you to be in tears over his death, but if you are out there celebrating this man's death and advocating for more of the same, I don't want you teaching. Certainly not children. I don't want you as my nurse. I question your value of human life. What are you going to do if you find out where I stand is not where you stand? I can't have confidence in you at that point. How could you? There are some look, for some of them, I weep for what's become of your humanity. But depending on what you're doing, it may not matter. I may think that, you being fired from your job might be a little excessive. That's down to the corporation. If they are trying to foster a culture where they care about humanity like that, then maybe you're not a good fit. I'm still sad for you. I still don't wish that hardship on you. I'm not celebrating the loss of your job. That sucks. I'm sorry. I really am. Because even if it's fair, even if I think it's what should happen, I don't have to revel in it. This is just employment. It's a big deal. It's not your life. I'd still be sad if you died, if I know you. If I just see that you died. Some part of me will mourn. And I'm glad that part of me is still there. I think about who I used to be. I didn't recognize it at the time. I do now. But there was a circumstance I was in, not dangerous, but I may as well just tell the story if I'm going to tell it. A friend of my mother, her ex-husband, not my mom's ex-husband, that would be my dad, but this friend of my mother, her ex-husband, was a very bad man. Abusive to her and the children, physically, emotionally, sexually. They were divorced, but because he's the kind of manipulative piece of crap that insists on making everything difficult, he still had, you know, visitation, custody of the kids. He was not allowed in their house. There was a restraining order against him for the mother in the home. But being the piece of crap that he was, didn't always follow the rules. So it was kind of decided by a few of the men around us that it was just better if somebody was in proximity whenever he had to drop the kids off. Just to make sure. Not a bad idea. One of those times it fell to me. So I got in my truck, I parked across the street, and I waited. And I didn't, because I'm me, I decided, you know what, if, something's almost certainly not going to happen, but if, I don't want to be fumbling around for something, so I got my tire iron, and it's just sitting there in my lap. Because if I have to go do something, let's just have it there. You know, why not? And some part of my mind, as I contemplated scenarios and I spun myself up, there was a dark, dark part of me that started going, you know, maybe he'll give you the excuse, and you'll get to. And as I think back on that moment now, even as I think at all about that gentleman, which I really don't want to call him that, but as I think about him, I can't see his face. I don't remember it. I could pick him out, believe it or not, I think if I had to. I know what he looked like. I know his shape. He's the kind of guy that if you looked at him, you would have thought, yeah, and I told you, I would not have to tell you what he did. You could look at him and go, yep. That's not just physical. Like that kind of rot, that kind of evil. I don't use that lightly. It is part of your countenance. I had good reason. And nothing happened. Sorry. Golly. But as I think back on that, who I was, maybe you even think, you know, that's understandable. Maybe it is. But I do not want to be that kind of person. And I don't want that for you, whoever the hell you are listening, if anyone is. We only get off of this road if we choose to. Nothing about the machinery and the architecture is going to make that easy. Because we have to be contrary to it to break it. And God, that's hard. But that's all we got. And I'm sorry. I'm going to say this because it's true of me, and it's true of you. It has to be you. Me, you, us. The machinery is not going to let us do this easily. Most of the other people won't take the first step. We will wait. We will wait, and we will get chewed up and spit out over and over again, waiting for them to take that first step. Everybody says in the aftermath of anything, now is the time to reach across the aisle, but nobody will reach first. We're stuck. So when I say it has to be you, bear in mind, I mean me as well. You have to find someone. The only way this breaks, the only way you break this propagandization is the only way it's ever been broken. You see someone that you used to think isn't human, and you spend enough time with them for those walls to break. Now, I'm not asking you to be stupid, okay? One of the reasons all this crap works is that it's not a lie. If it were a straight up anti-truth, the opposite of true, you could debunk it and you could move on with your life. The sad reality is none of that fear-mongering crap comes out of the ether. Yes, there's going to be some small group, relatively small, that is, I'll throw one at each side in the interest of fairness. Yeah, there's a group over there that is interested in the institution of biblical law into fiat to legislate and dictate morality. Those people exist. Some of them are crazier than others. They wish to enforce their worldview. There are people who think that sexualizing children is a good idea. Those people exist. I'm not going to lie to you about that. So when I say go talk to someone with a slightly different perspective than yours, I don't mean be stupid. Okay? But find someone that is normal, to the extent that we've got normal anymore at all. And just talk to them, not about politics, not find your common ground. It's there. I guarantee you it's there. I am blessed to have a handful of friends with whom I differ politically. And I don't talk a lot of politics with them, and most of the time they don't talk a lot of politics with me. It comes up on occasion. Thankfully, we're respectful. And I am so grateful to them. Because anytime I see some of the insanity, when I see the people feeding the machine, when I see the calls for extremity, when I see the radicalization process on either side. Remember, I have friends, some good friends who are further to the right than I am, and I'm grateful for them too. Same reason. That when I see someone say, man, everyone who voted for Trump is a fascist, I know who I think of, and I know they're not. And hear someone on the other say, boy, everyone on the left, they're not human, they're, the terminology gaining ground now, they're demons. They're not human. Look at what they've done. And I can think of my friends. And I know that they're not. And I really hope that for some of them, maybe I'm the furthest guy to the right that they have in their circle. I really hope that when they hear other people try to overly group and propagandize them about them on the other side, that they can think that I can be for them what they are for me. I really hope that. Oh, I've seen the aftermath, and again, it was the immediate aftermath from the people who celebrated. And then, a couple of days since then, the other side has been spinning up, and they're doing some of it. Yeah. They're also kind of starting, especially on the extreme, or on the more extreme ends. I don't follow people on the way extreme ends of either side. I refuse to. I won't give those people the time of day. But I have seen some of it starting up. I don't like it. I think if you need just a purely utilitarian reason to behave with humanity in the wake of tragedy, even to those you perceive as your enemies, maybe those who are your enemies, it's because of the normal people looking. The number of people that looked at the reaction to the death of Charlie Kirk and looked at the celebration and the lack of humanity being showcased there and noped out of anything those people want to do or say is pretty big. That should be terrifying for a lot of different reasons. I'm going to close here. Thank you, first of all, for coming with me on this. I needed to say it, and I think it needed to be said. So let me close with a little bit of how we might move forward. I mentioned before I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, President Russell M. Nelson, the prophet of, I believe, God's chosen prophet for the moment, until his time on this side of the veil ends, has for the past few years been warning us about the necessity of peacemaking. In fact, I think the day before, it would have been Tuesday, he turned 101 this week. He had a bit of a piece published in Time magazine. It's nice. I'd encourage you to read it. it reiterates a lot of the stuff that, again, those I've been hearing from him for a few years at this point. I'm going to quote one of his things that he said in this, because I like the way he put it here a little bit more than some of the other times he's put it. And whether you consider this to be potentially prophetic advice or just good life advice, I'll leave up to you to discuss. You can completely discard everything I've said too, by the way. Once again, I have no control over you, nor do I want any. So I'm going to quote President Nelson, and then I'll go into plugs. Quote. Man, I have read this before, and I promise I'm not going to cry like a... Quote. A century of experience has taught me this with certainty. Anger never persuades, hostility never heals, and contention never leads to lasting solutions. Close quote. Even if I didn't sustain him as God's prophet, seer, and revelator on the earth at this time, that's just good advice. All right. Thank you again for listening. Assuming you did. If you didn't, thank you for listening. Anyway. Jeez, that took a bit of time, didn't it? I did not time that out. So thank you again for listening. If you skipped everything that I just said, because boy is that a chunk of time, good grief. Yeah. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening even if you skipped it. There is no UFC event this coming week. They are taking it off. So I will be covering instead WrestlePalooza. Still a very stupid name. That will be Saturday. Elsewhere this week, Tuesday, there will be a Damn You Hollywood for the Long Walk. That'll be Alexis Hana and me. We will be hashing out that particular movie. So tune in for that if you're so inclined. I'm not on the triple feature on Monday. Yeah, just didn't work out that way. And I'm glad because that triple feature is 3 comedies that are not to my sense of humor. So, give that a watch and a listen if you want. That's going to be Mark, Jesse, and there's a third. I can't remember who, and I'm not going to be bothered to look it up. Again, Friday we'll be covering WWE SmackDown. Saturday will be WrestlePalooza. And Sunday, I'll be back here. And we will have a preview for UFC... what are we up to? This is the Ulberg and Reyes card. UFC on ESPN Plus 118. They're back in Australia. I have been lamenting this card since I got a look at it. And it's still... Oy. It's still not a pretty card, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Main event is relevant. There's that. Again, when I do the full preview, there's like 14 fights on this card. If I can't find 3, something has gone way wrong. I can probably find 3. We'll see if I can next week. That'll be a fun challenge for me. All right. That's it for me this week, guys. Thank you all very, very much again, as always, for tuning in. I'll see you next week, and I say it every week, but I really mean it. Stay safe out there. And continue to be well, be safe, and behave.